Americans spent $150 billion last year just on fees, not products, not services. Fees. DoorDash service fees, Amazon Prime, grocery delivery markups, convenience fees tacked onto convenience fees. $150 billion just for the privilege of not doing things yourself. And here's what nobody's saying out loud about that number. It's not a spending problem. It's an infrastructure problem, a psychological one, and honestly, kind of an American one. Today, we're going to break down how the United States, a country that basically invented productivity, engineered itself into total dependence on paying other people to do basic adult tasks. We'll go through the actual history, the psychological mechanics, and yeah, some real numbers, because this stuff has a genuine cost that most people aren't tracking. And look, I'm not here to tell you DoorDash is evil or that you need to churn your own butter. That's not the point. The point is, there's a difference between using convenience and being owned by it. And right now, for a lot of people, it's the second one. Here's a thing most people don't think about. For most of human history, time wasn't really a unit of value. You ate when you were hungry, slept when you were tired. Nobody was billing you for inefficiency. Then factories happened. Specifically, the Industrial Revolution restructured human life around the clock. Punch in, punch out, hourly wage, lunch break measured in minutes, your output tracked by the shift. Time stopped being lived and started being spent. And once time has a dollar value, wasting it starts to feel almost immoral. Henry Ford took that idea and ran with it. The assembly line, introduced at Ford's Highland Park plant in 1913, didn't just make cars faster. It made speed itself the goal. Before that, a craftsman might build something start to finish. There was skill, patience, iteration. The assembly line said, that's inefficient. You tighten this one bolt 900 times a day. And productivity exploded, which fine. That part's good. But it also baked something into the American psychology that's harder to measure. The idea that waiting is failure, that friction is a defect, that if something takes longer than it should, something has gone wrong. That brain virus, as I'd call it, is basically the entire origin story of the modern convenience economy. After World War II, America made a choice. Not explicitly. Nobody voted on it. But the infrastructure that got built, the highways, the suburbs, the cul-de-sacs, locked in a lifestyle that most people alive today inherited without ever questioning. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 funded over 41,000 miles of interstate. The GI Bill sent millions of veterans into brand new suburbs, cookie-cutter houses, freshly paved driveways, 15 minutes from everything by car and basically unreachable without one. Work, drive, school, drive, grocery store, drive, friend's house, also drive. The gym? Oh, that's a building you drive to so you can walk on a machine because you no longer walk anywhere in actual daily life. This isn't a bit, it's how a lot of American cities work. Urban planners call it car dependency, and the research is bleak. Highly car-dependent cities have lower physical activity, higher obesity rates, and, weirdly, lower social connection. You're surrounded by neighbors you've never actually met because everyone's in a metal box going somewhere. But for our story, the key thing is what car-based life did to consumer psychology. Once you're in a car, you want to stay in the car. Which is why, in 1948, a McDonald's in San Bernardino replaced car hop service with a walk-up window. Fast, cheap, same every time, no parking drama. By 1970, over 1,000 locations. By 1980, over 6,000. The drive-thru showed up mid-70s and was the logical endpoint. Food, without even having to leave the car. The car you only got in because everything requires a car. It's turtles all the way down. And here's the part worth actually understanding. Fast food didn't win because it was good. It won because it removed decisions. Same menu everywhere, same taste, same 4 minutes. Psychologists call this decision fatigue relief, and it turns out humans are wildly susceptible to it. When you're tired or stressed, fewer choices feel like a gift. Your brain will trade quality for certainty basically every time. That insight, that predictability is addictive, would become the entire playbook of the tech economy. Silicon Valley didn't invent this, McDonald's did. In 1975, microwave ovens outsold gas ranges in the United States for the first time. Think about what that actually means. A technology that barely existed in the late 60s dethroned the way humans cooked, something that had been stable for centuries, in under a decade. That's not just adoption, that's a complete reset of expectations. To be clear, microwaves aren't the villain here. Reheating leftovers is fine. This isn't a rant about appliances, but the microwave didn't just change how people cooked. It rewired what people thought cooking was supposed to feel like. Dinner went from a process, chop, prep, heat, stir, taste, adjust, learn, to a button. And once dinner is a button, anything that takes 20 minutes starts to feel like a design flaw, like someone forgot to optimize it. Behavioral economists call this reference point drift. Your baseline of what's acceptable keeps sliding. The old normal starts to feel broken, and whatever moves faster than the old normal gets called progress, even when it's just speed without any actual gain. By the 1980s, convenience food was a $100 billion industry. Frozen meals, canned soups, instant everything. But here's the cost that never showed up on the receipt. A generation of people who grew up without learning to cook. Not a character flaw, not laziness, just a skill that didn't get passed down because the infrastructure made it optional, and then eventually unnecessary. And skills, it turns out, are load-bearing. When you lose them, you become dependent on whoever still has them, which increasingly is a corporation. For most of the 20th century, convenience was somewhere you went to. The drive-thru, the mall, the microwave, you had to make a deliberate choice and physically move toward the thing. The iPhone flipped that in 2007. Suddenly, convenience followed you. It lived in your pocket, and it knew when your guard was down. And that distinction matters more than it sounds. There's a gap between I can order food if I need to, and food delivery is in my pocket at 11 p.m. when I'm already tired and my resistance is basically zero. One is a tool, the other is a trapdoor. By 2023, the U.S. food delivery market was worth roughly $26.5 billion, up from about $8 billion in 2018. That's not market growth. That's a behavioral shift that happened in 5 years. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, Instacart, Amazon Fresh. Every one of these platforms was designed around the same insight. The faster and easier you make something, the more often people do it. Amazon didn't just sell products. Amazon sold the elimination of waiting, same-day delivery, one-click checkout, saved payment info. People are viewing this item right now. Only 3 left in stock. Every single piece of friction between wanting something and having it, methodically removed. That's not UX design, that's behavioral engineering. And then came the subscription model, Prime, DashPass, Uber One, Walmart Plus, Instacart Plus, which, if you think about it, is genius in a slightly sinister way. Once you're paying a monthly fee to get free delivery, you're financially motivated to order more. The subscription makes every order feel cheaper, even when the service fees, tips, and markups mean you're usually spending significantly more than you would at a physical store. A 2022 Consumer Reports analysis found grocery delivery markups typically run 15 to 25% above in-store prices, before tips and fees. On a $100 order, you might actually be spending $135 to $145. The app just makes it feel like $100 because it's frictionless. Friction is a feature. When you remove it, you remove the moment where you'd normally reconsider. So let's just be real about the compounding effects of all of this. The $150 billion convenience fee figure comes from aggregated estimates across delivery, subscription services, and premium pricing. The average American household now spends an estimated $5,000 to $6,000 per year on subscriptions alone, a number that's nearly doubled since 2018, according to research from C+R Research. And a lot of that's streaming, sure, but a meaningful chunk is food delivery, grocery apps, and convenience services. And the thing about recurring charges is they're invisible. You stop noticing them. The CDC reports that roughly 42% of American adults are obese as of the most recent data. Multiple public health researchers have drawn direct lines between car-dependent urban design, ultra-processed food availability, and reduced daily physical movement. This isn't about willpower. When your environment is engineered to minimize effort, effort declines. That's not a character flaw, that's physics. This is the one that doesn't get talked about enough. Behavioral researchers have found that learned helplessness, the psychological state where someone stops trying because they've been conditioned to believe effort doesn't matter, isn't just a response to trauma. It can develop gradually through repeated outsourcing. When you don't cook, you lose confidence in your ability to cook. When you don't navigate, you lose your mental map of your city. When you don't wait, you lose tolerance for waiting. And here's the compounding problem. The less capable you feel, the more you outsource. The more you outsource, the less capable you become. Companies, by the way, are very aware of this loop. They call it increasing switching costs. The more dependent you are on a service, the less likely you are to leave it. Your learned helplessness is, from a business model perspective, a feature. Look, none of this means convenience is bad. Some of the most important technologies in human history are convenient. Washing machines, dishwashers, indoor plumbing, ambulances. The issue isn't convenience itself. It's the difference between convenience as a tool and convenience as a default. A tool is something you choose when it makes sense. A default is something you reach for automatically, without evaluating whether it's actually the right call. And what the last 70 years of American economic and infrastructure development have done, largely, is convert a bunch of optional tools into psychological defaults. Driving when you could walk, ordering when you could cook, subscribing when you could just buy once. None of those individual decisions are catastrophic, but they compound, quietly, over years. Convenience compounds, just like money, except in the wrong direction. Every shortcut trains your brain to avoid the effort class that shortcut belongs to. The avoided efforts accumulate. Then one day, normal adult tasks feel hard. And there's an app for that too. So here's the question worth sitting with. Not as an indictment, just as a genuine check-in. Are the convenience services in your life serving you? Or are you serving them? Because there's a version of modern life where you use delivery apps when you're genuinely slammed and cook most nights because you actually like doing it, where you subscribe to things that deliver real value and cancel the ones that are just plugging a gap your past self used to fill, where you're capable of the basics. Because capability, it turns out, is a form of wealth that doesn't show up in your account balance, but you feel it. America didn't stumble into a $150 billion convenience economy by accident. It was designed, optimized, marketed to you since you were a kid. That's worth knowing. And now you do. See you in the next one.